So next up is Bill Hoyer. He's the Natural Resources Manager for the U.S. Navy on San Nicolas Island. Bill is a great all-around naturalist. His enthusiasm is infectious, and I think that Bill could probably sell a bridge in a desert. So you're about to see that now. He's going to tell us about the multifaceted and highly collaborative feral cat removal efforts on that island and the subsequent recovery and delisting of the rare island night lizard and the extensive habitat restoration efforts that he's leading to curb erosion and regain biodiversity for resilience into the future. Welcome.
Thank you, Denise. Before I start, I'd like to say, was it 2010 when I started in the Navy, I think? I was Kim's, she was my mentor, and so I learned a lot from her, so it's really cool. Okay, so restoring the ecology of San Nicolas Island. You can see the island's pretty flat. On the north side, we have a shallow escarpment. On the south side, there's quite a steep one. It goes up to about 900 feet. The Navy's been here since the 40s. Prior to that, it was ranching, and then prior to that, Native American civilization on the island, who are still associated with the island to this day. The island is home to several endemic species. We have a ton of snails, plants, lizards, fox, lichen, and insects. Yep. Oh, sorry. There we go. And before I get started, I kind of want to talk about, why we do what we do. It's nice to go into conservation and say I want to, grow the plants. But we do this because there's a lot of federal laws out there. So it's good to remind ourselves, how my job is possible in the Navy, right? And as you can see here, we have a sea lion, California sea lion, under a closed beach sign for the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So we've talked a lot about the Endangered Species Act, Clean Water Act, Noxious Weeds Act, Marine Mammal Protection Act, Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And you all might be familiar with those, but the Sykes Act is really one that revolves around DOD, and that allows us to have my job, really, and to have an integrated natural resource management plan. And that allows us to have this long-term vision for restoration and an ecosystem level effect, whereas a lot of those other laws are taxa specific. The Sykes Act is really one that overlooks, looks at the general and supports activities to look at the entire ecology of the land. And of course, NEPA. So I do stand on the shoulders and an unbroken chain for about 50 years of natural resource managers on San Nicolas Island. Before this talk, I had never actually bothered to kind of put it together. This isn't written down anywhere, so I had to kind of call retirees to figure out who was there. And it's very interesting, and you can see Ron Dow started this, and in the 70s, that's when all the environmental laws came in. So we, all of a sudden, we had to start complying with things. And I'm lucky enough to have taken the baton from Grace Smith, and also to have 3 years of overlap with her is pretty unusual in federal government, and I was very, very lucky to have that. And whereas when Ron started in the first, he was by himself, I have an entire team that works with me, so I'm not the only person. You can see everyone in the bottom right there. So the first removal of a non-native animal I'm going to discuss is the removal of sheep. Now, this wasn't done for environmental reasons, but rather because the Navy was taking control over the island from the ranchers that were there at the time. So the sheep were valuable, and they were taken off as property. And the photo's a little granular. But this kind of set off Nick as one of the first islands to have a large ungulate removed from it. And as I'll show you later, I really benefited from that because the vegetation's had 80 years when I showed up, 70 years to recover prior. And I have a quote here from Blanche Trask. "San Nicolas is indeed a dying land. In all its length was found but one shrub 7 feet high, and in 3 or 4 localities Leptocyanes grow from 4 to 6 feet high." And that was 1900. Imagine another 40 years of overgrazing on that island prior to the Navy getting it. It's pretty much rock and sand by the time we took over. You can see in the bottom right there, there's a photo that actually shows the same area, and it's covered in leptocyanine. In 2010, cats were removed, feral cats. There's a lot of cool facts about this. We were one of the largest islands to have it removed without a toxicant. Having island fox on an island is cool, except when you're trying to control an animal of similar size and food interest. Partnership between the Navy, the Humane Society of the United States, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This was also funded by the legal settlement due to the DDT pollution that was mentioned earlier. It took a long time. Planning takes a long time for these activities, and removal was relatively quick. 65 cats were removed and have been rehomed in a cat sanctuary in Ramona, near San Diego. And I'd like to call out some key local people, Grace Smith, my predecessor, and Annie Little, right there, that spearheaded this. So. We did discuss a little bit about why you would remove feral cats, but I'll just repeat. They eat ground nesting seabirds, such as this western gull chick and its sibling, which is just coming out of the egg there. And you can see on the right a island fox eating an island night lizard. So the island foxes do eat the island night lizards, but they're also in competition. They were in competition, rather, with the cat, and because the cat was also eating the island night lizard. So you see both depredation on ground nesting seabirds and competition with the fox as well as eating night lizards. Post-cat removal, well, first and foremost, we had the island night lizard delisted, and I'll talk more about that later. But as Kim said, it demonstrates that the law works. That's very important for federal agencies, especially when I'm asking for funding, because I have a listed species, and I'm like, give me all this money so I can recover it. If nothing ever comes off the list when the population does recover, that would be a problem. That would undermine our ability to ask for funding. So it's very important that they do come off when appropriate. The average lifespan of our cute little endemic deermouth was increased once the cats were removed. And several ground nesting seabird firsts have happened since then. We do have Pelagic cormorant nests, Heermann's gulls nests, Caspian tern nests, and although they might have been there prior to the removal of the feral cats, ashy storm petrel populations. And really this frees up time and money to look at everything else, such as the island night lizard. So here's a little bio for you. Poor little guy was eaten by, feral cats. They live very long, up 35 years plus. They give birth to live young. They spend most of their time in a small area, and they even go veggie when they get older. Here's our delisting timeline. So as it was mentioned before, listed in 1977, but the threats were cats and habitat for the most part. In 2010, the cats were removed, and then to make sure that we never got another cat, or at least if we did, we can control it, we did get the San Nicolas Island biosecurity plan was implemented prior to my arrival to the island even. So we've had a pretty long history of biosecurity on San Nic. The delisting monitoring plan was drafted, and in 2014 it was delisted. But what not many people have talked about yet is once these species are delisted, that's not the end of the game. You have another, at least in this case, 10 or so years of monitoring and making sure that the population doesn't dip after the fact, or else they'll wave the specter of it coming back on the list. So a lot of what you're going to see next is what we did to keep it off the list or from going back and meeting our delisting requirements. So what needs to be restored? There are winners in the plant world, such as this beautiful field of leptocyanine. Definitely not what Blanche Trask saw, but this is in a sandy area on the northwest side of the island. A lot of the island looks like this, non-native grassy lands, and as Catherine said, or I realized after she said, this is mostly clay soil actually, where these non-native grasslands are not recovering. And this has been 80 years, and it's not coming back by itself. So active restoration, such as these volunteers here from CIR, are putting in habitat for the island night lizard, and that's Santa Barbara Island in the background there. The island night lizard likes cacti and boxthorn, and here's an example of a small habitat patch on the south side that we try to emulate. The vegetation on San Nic is really island night lizard centric for the last several years. They benefit from restoration sites that are isolated from existing populations. We funded with the USGS a population genetics study. There were some news out of it. The island night lizard, although lost a lot of habitat, did not suffer a genetic bottleneck, but all the existing populations were pretty desperate from each other, and the PopGen study basically said it would be best to put isolated populations or isolated habitat in areas where they could migrate to and then mix when pioneer individuals disperse from those locations. So the restoration sites that we have are a mix, a lot of cacti and boxthorn, in order to close a canopy up real tight to make sure that birds and foxes can't eat that island night lizard. Here is a time series of one of my favorite plantings. And you can see it in inception in 2014. A good thing to note is that the plants are placed in, but that's not the end of it. It's not one planting year and then you walk. You plant, you water, you weed, but because it's so harsh on that island, we actually come back several times and plant rarer plants in there or other plants that will grow after they're being protected by the cacti. And this is a Puntia littoralis. And I went out there last week and just decided to grab some shots just for this to get the latest. You can see a really cool thatch being built up, or thicket, sorry, not thatch, between the Artemisia that was planted years after the cacti, and in the yellow box you can see a board. You guys see that board at the base right there? That's a cover board that the U.S. Geological Survey put out, and that's how we monitor the successful use of our habitat that we're building for the island night lizard. So in that area, there are no island night lizards. We place the habitat in, we put the board down, and then every year they go out and check it once. And just recently, this is the first planting, this and one other actually got the first pioneer individuals of island night lizards. So we've created island night lizard habitat. It takes 7 or 8 years for it to happen. But now we could actually look at the genetics of those lizards and then see how they start using that habitat. But even though we did it for lizards, it doesn't just help lizards. There's a rare to us plant, Chenopodium californicum, common elsewhere, but there's only 2 locations on island, and it is growing very well, given that it can grow amongst the cacti. The cacti also stop seeds in the wind, such as this Baccharis you see on the right. And like any restoration ecologist, you want to see recruitment from the plants you put in the ground. And there is a seedling, as well as, if you go out there, a bunch of young Artemisia plants. Surprisingly enough, we also have some epiphytes growing on the cacti, so you can see the lichens growing on the cactus spines, which is very encouraging. So the biodiversity of an area that was previously just a bunch of non-native annual European grasses now becomes much more robust. And you can see the cacti fruit in red there with my finger, and that has a cacti seed on it. And that brown photo of seeds are actually seeds that were eaten by the endemic deer mouse on island. So this restoration has pulled in species from all over and went from non-native to having a bunch of, almost a network of individuals, which brings me to the next slide, our barcode program, led by the garden's very own Dr. Lehman, right over there. We have a goal of collecting one of everything in the terrestrial environment and then sequencing part of it. What we would like to do is create a library so we can take things such as scat of animals like night lizards or foxes, sequence it and see what it's eating. That will better give us an idea of what needs to be in those new restoration sites. Some things, just like plants, can grow in and migrate into those sites, but other things may not. So we might need to move in things like a snail or other invertebrates maybe that are distribution limited. We've learned a lot from this program, including we did our first fungi survey. We have over 104 fungi that were not known prior to this. So our species list is blowing up. 13 new vascular plants, 4 of them being native. You can see bryophytes, lichens, and I haven't even touched on the soil algae, which are several new genera to science being named. I don't even remember how many species at the moment. Also have a new millipede. I think the long-term benefits to this are that the data doesn't ever get old. We get to access it online, and then also other islands can use it. If they want to see what their organisms are eating and they're having trouble with the species that are not recovering on their own, they can now build a food web and use all of the overlapping taxa that San Nic has. And we do have a lot of overlapping taxa with the other islands. Lastly, I'd like to talk about invasive plant biocontrol. The islands, unfortunately, have been invaded by crystalline ice plant. That's that red carpet you see behind this. We've spent years studying it, and Dr. Denise Knapp here did a several-year-long study looking at the impacts, especially to the insect fauna in that mat. After much studying, and not just from us, but also from groups in Mexico and the Park Service, we were unable to find a scalable method of control for this species that works. So myself with Naval Base Coronado, my colleague Brian Munson, decided that we were going to partner with U.S. Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Research Services, and they have a biocontrol program. So we started to look at and for agents for this very taxonomically not related plant to anything on the island. And in the lower right, you can see one of our first agents, which is a genus of, it's the greater of all weevils as far as I'm concerned, Lixus, in South Africa that is a stem borer. It's just a candidate, but that might be one insect that, if it follows the 7 years of testing, which would be ahead of it, might be something that we could consider using to control it. But first step in that process is finding the point of origin. And just a pretty cool little note, all the island managers, both sides of the border, have been very helpful, as well as mainland people, and we've started to analyze the data of where does the plant come from. So where does our crystalline ice plant come from in Southern California and Baja? And it turns out so far, and this is half the data, that they all come from the Canary Islands. Go figure. So there's some historical story going on here that is going to be really interesting to find, even if we don't find an agent one day. But it looks like they all came from the Canary Islands, and the Canary Islands came from South Africa. So there was some sort of trade route, something going on way back, and that's how that got out here. But the impacts to the island are great. They wipe out whole coastal areas. There's no native plants. The seed bank's impressive. Thousands in a little spot. They last 100+ years. It's a problem. So at that, I'd like to thank all of our partners. This covered so many partners. I wrote down as many as I could there. And thank you very much.